I think NATO's making a very foolish mistake, and I've long said that, I wonder whether or not NATO would ever be there for us. So this was a great test, because we don't need them, but they should have been there. The head of Germany just made a statement that, they weren't involved and they have nothing to do with the war, but at the same time, they think we did a great thing by knocking them out.
Do they think the United States did a great thing by going to war with Iran? Something tells me that our European allies were actually advising against starting this war, especially considering the fact that they are definitely experiencing the pain of increasing oil prices. We'll get to that later in the show. But for now, I just want you to remember, close your eyes and remember a time, it wasn't long ago, when President Donald Trump alleged that he had cobbled together this coalition of European countries who'd be willing to help the United States take control of the Strait of Hormuz, in which, of course, 20% of the globe's oil and gas is transported through and is currently controlled by the Iranians. Now, it appears that, Trump didn't actually cobble together a group of countries willing to help us. In fact, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was asked why NATO would engage in a war that they had not started. And here's what she had to say.
We did not consult NATO before the war began, and it's a defensive alliance, obviously, that doesn't traditionally engage in the Middle East preemptively. Why is it fair for the president to expect NATO allies to help now after the fact?
NATO allies benefit far more from the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz than the United States does. As you know, thanks to this president's energy agenda, we are a net exporter of oil. We have enough resources here at home for our people, and that's a good thing, thanks to President Trump. The Strait opening is obviously good for America because it will stabilize the global oil industry. It will bring prices down again, but it greatly benefits Europe and our allies in NATO, and the president wants to see them do more.
But our European allies didn't ask for this war. So, and let's please, here's the thing. If the Trump administration wants to come out and say, you know what, we've been wrong. Our entire economic ideology has been wrong. In fact, we would like to nationalize our oil and gas. And it will be an asset, a resource that we will reserve for the American people. We're going to nationalize oil and gas. We're going to take it from the corporations who, of course, sell oil and gas on the international market. This is an international market that we're talking about. Unless you nationalize your oil and gas, have the state, meaning the United States in this case, seize control of oil and gas, and you use that oil and gas for the American people and you don't export it. Now, is that gonna happen? No, that's not gonna happen. So when you hear US politicians or members of the Trump administration allege the Europeans need the Strait of Hormuz more than we do. No, it is a global energy market that we're having a discussion about right now. So the Strait of Hormuz, in which 20% of the globe's oil and gas travels through, liquefied natural gas I'm talking about, travels through. Yeah, it is a problem when it is effectively closed by the Iranians because we, the United States, decided to spark a war with Iran, yes, on behalf of Israel. This is not a war the US needed. This is not a war the US wanted. We get nothing, literally nothing out of this war. But as Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, has said on the record, it has been his dream for 40 years to get the United States to attack Iran like this. So congratulations. And anyone calling me an anti-Semite for plainly stating the truth is an enemy of this country, okay? Wants to basically provide cover for the detrimental relationship that we have with the Israelis right now. They are a liability to the American people. They are a liability to our country. They are a liability to our soldiers, tens of thousands of them who are currently in that region of the world right now, risking their lives for no reason other than Israel wants to expand its borders and essentially kneecap Iran so they don't face any challenges as they do so. That is the reality of the situation. That is the truth. Now, with that in mind, Trump also seems to be engaging in a bit of cope, okay? Because as he claims, our European partners just absolutely love the fact that we've started this war. They love it, they support it, he claims. Trump also seems to be engaging in a bit of cope. He seems to be under the impression that the Europeans absolutely love the fact that we started a war with Iran. He says, quote, I think NATO is making a very foolish mistake in not helping the US with this war. Everyone agrees with us, but they don't want to help. And we as the United States have to remember that because we think, it's pretty shocking. No, it's not pretty shocking. Why would anyone in Europe think this war is a good idea? First of all, they're much closer geographically to the war. Obviously, this is going to hurt the global energy market. Europe was already harmed by the fact that there were sanctions on Russian oil after Russia invaded Ukraine. Now, Trump has temporarily lifted some of those sanctions to alleviate some of the pain that the increased oil prices are causing to our European allies. And so, the idea that all these European countries behind the scenes are like, yeah, keep going, this is great, I find laughable. I don't think that's true. But NATO allies, to be clear, actually did caution against the war prior to the war happening. Now, Trump says that he does not intend to retaliate against our NATO allies for refusing to engage in this war, to defend the United States, to work alongside the United States. When he was asked by the media fairly recently if he had any retaliation in mind, he said he had nothing in mind. And I hope that he's telling the truth about that. I don't think it would be in the best interests of the American people to further alienate ourselves from actual allies. Although he has previously, by the way, threatened to leave NATO, which he would not be able to do unilaterally. You would need 2/3 of Congress to vote in favor of leaving NATO to make it so. But even Republican lawmakers like Congressman Don Bacon admit that our NATO allies have, soured toward Trump's America for what I believe are pretty obvious reasons. Take a look.
They've gone to war on our behalf after 9/11. He seems to forget that. But he has talked down to our NATO allies from day one. And when you treat your allies disrespectfully, you can't just expect them to jump when you say jump. And in this case, I sort of understand that they were coordinated with, talked to about the attacks in Iran, and then to suddenly want them to help out. It's probably a bridge too far for most, but he needs to work on strengthening our alliances. If you have a strong friendships, they're more willing to do this. But when you denigrate Denmark and all these other countries, they're going to be more reluctant, and there's a loss of trust.
Don't forget, Noble Mobile is saving you a ton of money. So a lot of people are signing up now and beginning to realize, what the hell, why am I paying so much to Verizon and AT&T? So your bill's only $50 a month, but it can actually be less because they give you money back if you don't use your data. So if you're paying more than $50, there's no reason to not switch. It's crazy not to switch because same phone, same number, same contacts, literally nothing changes. TYT.com/switch, TYT.com/switch. All right, we'll be right back.
Now, there are many things about Don Bacon I'm not a fan of, let's just put it that way. But he was on point in the statement he just made in that video we watched, because speaking of Denmark, Trump's nonsense about fighting Denmark in order to acquire Greenland wasn't so smart, was it? Especially in the moment that we find ourselves today. Turns out that that was a huge mistake, because now as Trump is begging our European allies for help, well, they're actually pivoting in a completely different direction. And this is something that does jeopardize US national security, right? You need to forge alliances and friendships, not out of the kindness of your own heart, but because it's mutually beneficial and you want to do it for security purposes, right? But Nordic countries recently had a joint press conference, and it was led by Denmark's Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen. And you're about to hear the kind of thinking that's going on when it comes to our European allies, especially these Nordic countries. Are they thinking about helping us in an illegal war? No, but they are concerned about their own security. And if you read between the lines, the US is not thought to be part of that security. Take a look.
The old world order is gone. and it will probably not come back. So we have to build something new, and it has to be a world order that is built on the values that we represent, the leaders standing in front of you today. We have had a totally unacceptable pressure from US and the US president. It has been very difficult for the people in Greenland to experience this. And one of the reasons why we have been able to stand firmly on very common values, that you have to respect sovereign states, that you have to respect a people's right for self-determination, is because of our good friends in the Nordic countries, in Europe, but also with partners outside, especially you, Mark. So we are deepening our cooperation in the Arctic region. It is important. We are deepening our cooperation also militarily in our own region, not only the Arctic, but also more locally in the northern part of Europe.
Now, notice she cited two specific words that I think are important: sovereignty and self-determination. So sovereignty and self-determination are two things that doesn't really fall in line with Israel's foreign policy goals. And as long as we're attached at the hip to Israel's illegal foreign policy goals, which includes genocide, displacement, expanding borders, annexing land, we are going to continue alienating ourselves. We are gaining nothing from aiding and abetting Israel in their plot to expand their borders and take control of that region. And by the way, I don't think it's a mistake that now there are questions as to whether or not the United States will rebuild its military bases in the Gulf countries. Do these Gulf countries really want to have a US military presence there, knowing that they don't really get much from it, do they? When push comes to shove, the US is doing nothing to defend those allies. And that doesn't speak volumes simply to our Gulf allies. It speaks volumes to our other allies who are concerned that they can't rely on the United States. And I think they're justified in the way they're feeling today. But let me turn to Norway's prime minister, who called out war crimes, escalations, and how the globe is being punished by a war that they have nothing to do with. Take a look.
We are not part of this war. We did not initiate it, but we are all affected by it. So I think there's a clear call here that international law must be respected, and it should be the responsibility of the concerned parties to find ways of ending the hostilities that now have great impact around the world. We are concerned to see that there is still an escalation. There are still worries about how the world economy will be affected by the energy situation around the Gulf. For our part, we will use any channel we have, any opportunity we have to urge the parties to find a way that will not escalate this war. I think that's what we can say. It is not our war. It seems to us that the plan for how it will develop is pretty unclear. And that's the danger with initiating wars, that they rarely follow a script.
He is absolutely correct in pointing out how disastrous this is for the economy, the global economy. And on top of that, as an American, I think that this is disastrous for our global partnerships, long-standing alliances that are mutually beneficial. That's what I'm talking about. But just checking in with the economic ramifications of this disastrous war, obviously this war is not well thought out. There is no exit strategy. I think Trump is just taking it day by day, and it's been a disaster. So we got some news about Israel's latest attacks against Iran. And it's not just various leaders that are being assassinated by Israel in Iran. Turns out that they're targeting some very important infrastructure, which leads to retaliation by Iran. And we all suffer from it. So what am I talking about? Let's put up this graphic. This is from Dropsite News. They reported on how Israel struck Iran's South Pars gas field, which happens to be the world's largest natural gas field and a core pillar of Iran's energy supply. Well, that was a really dumb move. Let me just sidetrack for a second and note that it really does seem like Israel is going out of its way to ensure that this war continues and that Trump doesn't have any real avenue for peace negotiations. When you strike, this energy infrastructure, this massive natural gas field in Iran, what do you think Iran is going to do? They're going to want to retaliate, which is an escalation. This is all an escalation. What Israel did here is an escalation of this war intentionally, because Israel knows that Trump wants to get out of this, okay? They don't want to get out of it because they want to topple the regime. Trump keeps signaling like, oh, we obliterated their military capabilities. No, okay, maybe we can get out now. And boom, one of the more moderate individuals in Iran, Larijani, who could potentially help negotiate a peace deal or an end to the war, they assassinate him, that guy's gone. Now you escalate the war by attacking this natural gas field. It's a huge escalation. So the major escalation, as Dropsite writes, comes alongside reported impacts on other oil and petrochemical facilities. And so the IRGC linked Tasnim news agency basically issued a warning urging people to immediately leave major oil and gas sites in Saudi Arabia, in the UAE, and Qatar, saying that they had become direct and legitimate targets that could be struck within hours. And then they listed the specific sites that they plan on attacking, right? And again, it's in Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar. As of this morning, the price of Brent crude had surged 4% from yesterday. So if you guys can remember the reporting we did on the price of oil per barrel, it was about $102. That price has now gone up to $108. It will continue to go up because oil and gas infrastructure is being struck, is being targeted. Iran has already begun its retaliation. There's no end in sight. So we are going to feel the pain economically. Our European allies who didn't want this war, didn't ask for this war, and want nothing to do with this war are going to feel the pain economically. This alienates us from long-standing alliances that I think are actually important to the United States. And for what? In order to carry out the desires, the wishes, the fanatical nonsense our Israeli partners demand? What do we get from that? Other than dead soldiers, other than endless wars, other than endless hostility toward the United States for carrying out the disastrous interests of the Israelis. You're not going to get this on CNN, okay? You're probably never going to see me on CNN again, by the way. Okay, you're not going to get this on any other news organization that's longstanding, any legacy media organization. You're going to get this from Indie News. But make no mistake about it, this is the truth. And so if anyone wants to refute what I'm saying here, please explain to me what is the benefit of constantly fighting Israel's wars? What do we get out of it? And who knows, maybe someone can stump me, but so far I haven't seen it.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.